deserving NXT Women's Champion. She was under the mentorage of Dusty Rhodes when he was the GM of NXT. Of course, we all know the history of the Rhodes family. Of course, Dustin, Cody, Goldust, everybody had a huge history when it came to the Rhodeses, and obviously Sasha Banks learned a great deal from people like Dusty and Dustin and Cody, and I think that really needs to be carried over for someone like Sasha Banks, who refers to herself as the boss. I like that catchphrase of how she's the boss, and one of the first video blogs that I ever threw up on my YouTube channel was actually called Bank on Sasha, because I thought that it probably the top 5 divas from NXT that you could have brought over and crossed over from WWE. One of the ones that you could have brought over very fastly, probably sooner than a lot of people who got opportunities with WWE, was the boss, Sasha Banks. In fact, because of just how skilled she is. I like her catchphrase of the boss, and I also like her finishing move called the bank statement, which is an awesome way to cap off the character of Sasha Banks, who really goes a long way when you talk about someone in terms of having the full package with WWE. And I think you can easily get at least 7 through 10 years out of someone like Sasha Banks. Now, it's highly unlikely that Sasha Banks will remain under contract with WWE for over 10 years, because divas like Alicia Fox, who have been there 9.5 through 10 years of WWE, and divas like Kelly Kelly and Eve Torres don't come along very often, and it's very rarely that you produce a Trish Stratus and Stacy Keibler. It's bad enough you don't produce any more Trish Stratuses and Stacy Keiblers anymore, and it's just as equally as bad when you don't get 10 years out of someone who you initially think you're going to get the next decade out of in terms of a diva or a diva's champion or someone to promote WWE in its entirety as a promotion. And I think that's really something critical that needs to be looked at in WWE, because you're not producing divas who are holding on for 7 through 10 years. And someone like Sasha Banks, Bayley, Alexis Bliss are divas who you can easily do that with. It's just they're not given enough of an opportunity, and Sasha Banks apparently is number 1 now for a diva who's not being given an opportunity. You know, if WWE were still doing the top 25 wrestlers every week, the Power 25, I think, was called back in the day, Sasha Banks would probably be ranked up there in the top 10. If you're talking about a top 25 divas list released every week, Sasha Banks would be definitely at the top of the Power 25. I wish they were still doing something like that. They probably still are. I just don't make a habit of going to WWE.com and checking the ratings and statistics of divas and wrestlers who are on top of the top 25 through 30 or 50 list of top names every week, released weekly on WWE.com. There were also a lot of interesting write-ups on Sasha Banks on different websites like ProWrestling.com, ProWrestling.net. If you browse through their headlines board, you'll notice a lot of updates concerning Sasha Banks' status with WWE, the push that she's apparently going to be receiving in due time, and I hope this is something that's fallen through with, because I issued a video blog on my YouTube channel at Jonathan Clarke 22, of course, called Bank on Sasha, because I really have high premonitions when it comes to Sasha Banks. And how can you not have high premonitions when it comes to someone like Sasha Banks, with how impressive she was on NXT and how impressive she's been early on in her career, a part of Team Bad? But I really think the biggest issue that is being overminded and underutilized a lot here is the fact that she's really just the third wheel of this whole Team Bad thing. When you're talking about teams like Team Bella and Team PCB, which obviously have gone their separate ways, but still hanging on with what Charlotte and Becky Lynch are doing for the remainder of the team. With Stephanie endorsing the Divas division, do you think we could be getting more out of the Divas division, or should be getting more out of the Divas division, especially with how much promise Stephanie has put behind this new Divas Revolution? As I just mentioned, what a difference 10 years has made. Do you think it could be far more impressive than what it is? I think that if it were up to wrestling fans, I think Sasha Banks would be over someone like a Paige, more so in a feud with Charlotte than what we're seeing with Paige versus Charlotte, reiterated all the time, starting with Survivor Series, their initial match. Charlotte retaining the championship, holding on to it ever since September, defeating Nikki Bella, the longest reigning Divas champion in history, surpassing the reign of AJ Lee, which set it at 295 days, a record I didn't think anyone was going to get past. And then here comes Charlotte to beat the longest reigning champion of all time, Nikki Bella, who we haven't seen since. Dropping the title at Night of Champions, also a previous victory under the belt of Charlotte a couple of days prior to Charlotte officially winning the title at the Night of Champions pay-per-view. So I think there's a lot that can go with Charlotte's reign as champion, a lot of contenders you can throw the way of Charlotte, but we're seeing the same 3 or 4 contenders all the time throwing Charlotte's way, which is really irritable to wrestling fans. I understand how you feel, especially when you feel like someone like Sasha Banks should be being put over more than what she is, because she's the favorite of a lot of wrestling fans out there who watch wrestling for one big reason, and that one big reason obviously is the Divas Revolution, apart from anything else happening in WWE. WWE because, as we've mentioned time and time again in these video blogs on my YouTube channel at Jonathan Clarke 22, the DL is really noticeable, more noticeable than it's been over the last couple of months, with names like Seth Rollins, Randy Orton, John Cena, Sting always popping up on the DL for various reasons, from back to neck to knee injuries, some of the more severe injuries that wrestlers like Stone Cold Steve Austin, Shawn Michaels, Chris Benoit, Chris Jericho, Edge have suffered over the years, some of the more difficult injuries rebound and come back off of. And because this DL is really noticeable, you think you would be focusing on creating stars like Sasha Banks, but you're not. You're just putting the same divas over and over and over all the time, who you have a considerable amount of faith in, who you're kind of questioning from the point of view of a radio show host and columnist, who I've questioned more times than enough, especially when you have a phenomenal list of divas who could be being put over like Sasha Banks, like Alexis Bliss, like Bayley, who are having nothing consequently done with their characters. One diva who I'm really high on, for instance, is Summer Rae. One of the more recent video blogs I threw up on my YouTube channel is, in fact, Summertime Has Arrived in WWE, how Jonathan Clarke discusses how Summer Rae should be being pushed by WWE, because I believe that is a fact. Summer Rae should be being pushed by WWE rather than being in the corner of wrestlers like Fandango and Tyler Breeze and Rusev and Dolph Ziggler. She's just there, making wrestlers into bigger names than what they already are. The last person that Dolph Ziggler or Summer Rae needs are each other, and the last person that someone like Rusev ever needed was Summer Rae. Summer Rae needs herself, because Summer Rae is not needed by WWE as much as what WWE needs Summer Rae. Summer Rae needs to be bigger than what she is, and I think that by having her manage people like Tyler Breeze and Rusev and Dolph Ziggler, it's only holding Summer Rae back from realizing her fullest potential. And I can say the same thing about a lot of divas. Alexis Bliss, Bayley, Sasha Banks. It's the same thing reiterated all the time. How many more times do I need to press and force this issue of how so many divas deserve pushes in WWE, but they're never given that opportunity? Sasha Banks probably being the biggest. I just mentioned the Power 25. If that was still being released weekly over on .com, Sasha Banks would probably be in the top 10, if not top 5, top suggestions for being either contender or champion when you're talking about divas champions or contenders within that division, which is always evolving and always expanding off of what it initially was. I just spoke on how a difference of 10 years has really played and impacted on WWE and the definite future that it's going to have. It's on a level now to be competing with Ring of Honor's women's division, which it's surpassed, and obviously on a level to be competing with TNA's Knockouts division, which have more championships and more of a critical factor playing on their momentum, of course, with more options for the women in TNA wrestling. And that's why we see a ultimately bigger roster all the time developing in TNA when you're talking about TNA Knockouts and women's wrestlers and athletes. More of an option, and it's only now, years after TNA's Knockouts division was really noticeable by wrestling fans, that WWE's Divas division is offering more of an option to its wrestlers. And I wish there was more of an option all the time for the Divas division and the Divas Revolution, but there has never really been, and that's why TNA's Knockouts division has always had a decisive advantage, which is really noticeable. So I hope that in the future these issues are corrected, although we may be a long time away from seeing the majority of these issues corrected, and although they may never find a point of correction with these issues. I think these issues have been undermined and recognized for far too long, and until these issues are corrected, we're going to be stuck in the same proverbial position than what we are now, the same precarious corner, the same precarious position than what we've been stuck in for years. And again, it falls back on, the blame of WWE creative, and now Triple H and Vince McMahon seem to have lost their sense of direction as COOs and chairmen of WWE and principal owners when you're talking about Stephanie, who's had a huge influence on some of these storylines. For a while there, a couple of years ago, I thought it was going to be AJ Lee versus Stephanie for the Divas Championship, but it didn't go that direction, and that would have been really interesting to have seen in the Divas division, as opposed to Brie versus Stephanie, with Nikki turning on Brie to make Nikki Bella into a heel and force the issue of how she had to be the longest reigning Divas champion in history because of her relationship with John Cena. AJ versus Stephanie ultimately probably would have been the better direction for that all to head in, and Stephanie playing a critical role in the Divas Revolution more so and more often would definitely influence the Divas division to reach unprecedented heights, although we may be a long way away from seeing that happen, and probably never get the chance of seeing Stephanie compete in the Divas division, probably because she'd murder half the Divas because of her size and just how much bigger and more professional Stephanie's gotten in terms of being physical, and just the shape that she's in right now. We have probably no chance of ever having seen that. And if you haven't seen the shape Stephanie's in, you have to check out some of these workout videos that have been posted on Pro Wrestling News websites. If I find any I will throw some of them off on my Facebook page and Twitter at facebook.com/HEW Entertainment and twitter.com/Jonathan Clarke1 for you to check out and browse through because the shape Stephanie's in is utterly phenomenal. If you haven't checked out her DVDs or anything that she's released over the last couple of months, they definitely show you how far Stephanie has come. But not to say the negative things about the Divas division, not too many negative things, because the Divas division is getting far more impressive all the time with all these new Divas coming in and out, all these creative storylines being created, and it obviously has a lot to do with how Sasha Banks is having a huge influence on the wrestling fans. I say this all the time about Divas. I love to compare them to wrestlers like CM Punk and Daniel Bryan, who were obviously over before over was even a term in professional wrestling. I mean, Sasha Banks to me is really the Daniel Bryan of the Divas division. Just as Daniel Bryan was the innovator behind the Yes movement, it seems like Sasha Banks has metamorphosized into the Daniel Bryan, and that's why I am really irritated over the whole issue of her seeming to be the third wheel in Team Bad and being undermined and underutilized for far too long. This issue has gone unrecognized for far too long, and it's time for this issue to reach a point of correction and or finality, because if you're going to put Sasha Banks over, the time is now, because I've said this more times than enough, and I think I can get away with saying it one more time. If there ever was a time to be a fan of professional wrestling, especially the Divas division primarily, that time is now, because I think the Divas division has really come into its own. It definitely has separated itself into an entirely different category than what wrestling fans have been used to seeing the Divas division affiliated with over the years, because we've come a long way from Divas like Stacy and Trish and Tori and Jazz and Victoria and Mickie James and Kelly. A long way from Divas like Jillian, who'd come out with a headset and sing Slice Bread #2. The creativeness behind the Divas, their characters are definitely having a different persona in the way of how they're looked at, and definitely things have been shaken up. The complexity of the Divas division has emphatically changed over the last 10 years. What a difference 10 years has made, and Sasha Banks having a lot to do with that. Bank on Sasha for a future in WWE. Leave me your thoughts in the comments if you have any at Jonathan Clarke22. Tweet me on Twitter with the hashtag Sasha Banks, Bank on Sasha. Something along those lines at Jonathan Clarke1 if you got a thought. And also on Facebook, you can get in touch with me at HEW Entertainment, on Google Plus at HEW Entertainment is where the conversation is ongoing, taking a look at things like Taylor Swift, Donald Trump, and Star Wars The Force Awakens, which opens in theaters worldwide on December 18th. We're a little over 1 week away from the release of the first Star Wars movie of the series in years, and a lot of people looking at this new villain,